Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. We do appreciate it. Today we are talking about loan term, extension stuff, potential defaults. There's a few things to cover here, both on the borrower side and on the capital investor side. And I think it's important to keep an open mind and to realize that you should have control over the decisions that we're about to talk about, and also be flexible. We'll jump into a story here in a second where we started out a little bit too rigid with our loan terms in early HMB days, and we lost a really good borrower because of it. And that's because we didn't have a complete grasp on what we could and couldn't do, like kind of the balance of who's in control between the borrower, us, the capital investor, everyone involved. So we're going to get into all that stuff on this show.
Yeah, I mean, this has definitely been a popular topic. And, keep in mind, there's a difference between what it says in your loan documents and the potential business decision that you decide to make. Now, obviously, your loan documents should state that if a loan is over the term, in default, whatever the case is, that you can potentially pursue whatever you need to collect, have to foreclose, charge late fees, extension fees, and that's okay to be in your loan doc. I mean, that in loan docs, that's what it should be. But in reality, you need to make a business decision on a case-by-case basis of what should happen, right? Because the last thing you want to do is you have a good borrower that maybe got held up on permits, they're making monthly payments, and then the loan's due and they're not fully done the project, or it's not fully sold. And you're like, nope, my loan docs say that I'm going to pursue foreclosure. I'm going to charge this hefty late fee and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's a great way to, mess up a good relationship with a borrower. Just like Chris said earlier, that was something that we did, year 3 in the business, year 2, year 3 in the business. And we lost a really good borrower because we followed to a T the loan docs instead of kind of using common sense and making a business decision. So, let's go through some things that we do internally inside when the loan matures and the loan comes due. Now, keep in mind, inside our business, we typically write 12-month loans. We think that's kind of the best way to do it. They're systematized that way. So, we're not doing like, oh, this borrower is 3 months, this borrower is 6 months, this borrower is 12 months, this borrower is 18 months. Everything we do, for the most part, is a 1-year term. We find that's works best for us. We find that to also be fair to borrowers. Our average loan is, usually outstanding for about 7 months or so. Obviously some loans take significantly less than that. Some loans, especially some of our commercial loans, are on the books longer. So we'll kind of discuss kind of what we do in each individual situation.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why this topic came up for a podcast today, is because we just exited a 12-month loan that paid off 6 years later, give or take. It was a very, very good exit. So let me ask you a question, and then so we can give the audience a picture of how we handle these situations. So as a loan originator, it happens every month that you have loans that hit the maturity date. What's your process? What do you do?
So typically, we have over 200 loans on the books in any given time. And, we're doing, kind of default meetings on a regular basis, usually on a monthly basis. So we know kind of what loans are reaching maturity and then what loans are past due that we need to be proactive to collect on. So the ones that are reaching maturity, if we haven't communicated with them already, it could be a perfectly fine deal. We try to get on the phone, or, ideally the phone, if not via email, and try to figure out what their game plan is. Like, what's their game plan? Another trigger that we're able to determine from our loan servicing software is how much construction budget they have left in escrow. Mm-hmm. If let's say it's month 11 and they're making monthly payments, but they haven't touched the construction escrow, let's say it's an $80,000 holdback, like, minor red flag, be like, hey, what's going on over here? Are you doing the project, or have you abandoned it? Like, what's going on? So step 1 is getting on the horn with them and determining what their game plan is. Like, do you need an extension? Why do you need an extension? Right? Because if somebody's abandoned a property, even if they're paying, we need to be a little bit more kind of forceful and determine what we want to do over somebody that might have had permit issues, or Yeah, it's on the market and they're trying to sell, or they're having refinance issues. And if they're having those issues, it's okay. Well, why are you having a refinance issue? Oh, well, the lender just repulled my credit and I'm at a 640. I need to be at a 680. And my credit went down because I got some dings. It's like, okay, well, that might not be realistic that you're going to be able to refinance here in the next month. You might have to sell, right? So I think a verbal conversation is step one.
What happens if they don't get back to you about the extension? They're paying on time, they need to extend, and they just don't hit you back.
So I think it's two things could potentially happen. Communication's key. Obviously you could do two things. You could, I would say that the majority of it is, let's figure out a way to get them on the phone, or figure out a way to get in touch with them, email, text, chat. If they're not getting in touch with us and they're making monthly payments, sometimes we just let it ride. It really depends on the situation. We let it ride. We'll look on MLS to see if it's active listings. I wouldn't say it doesn't happen all that often, right? Because at least we're getting some sort of communication, good or bad, from them. And again, sometimes just like, okay, let's just let it ride and see what's up. We're getting monthly payments. It's fine. I don't know how common that is, that like just never hear from them at all, and they're in good standing by making payments.
Right. I know it pops up here and there with like Ian and Ryan, that people know that they're having that extension fee conversation, so they might dodge it. So, all right, let's talk about a couple other things. I don't know why that turned into interview style. Like I was just firing questions at you.
I like interview style. I think we can.
Me too. Okay, a couple other issues related to extensions, and also about that one that we mentioned earlier, that 12-month loan stayed out for 6 years. So that particular one was a small commercial property, coincidentally in the town where Jason and I grew up. And we knew it was a low LTV loan, probably like 30 to 40 loan to value. But we knew that the exit strategy was going to be tough. The borrower's credit is decent, maybe like in the 640, 650 range. So like, okay, but not really qualifying for a commercial permanent loan, not on that level. You need to have better credit than that. Also, I wasn't sure.
Did you mention it was a commercial office condo too? Okay. Yeah. Because that's important to note that
commercial income property
exit strategies on commercial properties are just way harder. There's no DSCR type of loan.
Right. They have to get a bank loan. And there's a good chance, even with solid cash flow, they won't qualify for that. So like, we know that going in.
Yep.
And we have a few other situations with the same borrower like that. And we have a handful of situations with a different borrower that are similar. So each year, a couple issues related to that hopefully can help you make decisions in your business. We don't have extension language in our note. We could. Other lenders we know do. We started without that just so we could make it a negotiation or a judgment call kind of thing. Like we weren't just locked into whatever the note said. So you could look at it either way. And I found that when private lenders do have extension language in their note, it's pretty freaking harsh. Like 1% for the first month, 1.5% for the second month, 2% for the third month. And of course they don't have to collect exactly that, but they lead with that. They start with that in terms of negotiating. So we leave it open-ended. Like Jason said, we have conversations with them and we can do what they need. If it's a really good client, we might do no extension fee at all. It might be cheap. Like we'll give you, 1 point for 6 months. It doesn't matter. You're paying on time. It's fine. In this particular case, we were tacking on a couple points, 2 or 3 points, and then just extending 12 months. And then it would mature again. And we would tack on 3 points, the same as the original origination fee from when it first closed in 2018, and extend it again. And that went on and it just paid off. And obviously that added up and it was a big payday. And the borrower said, thanks. She said, thanks for working with me. I know that this went way, way longer than we anticipated. Even though we got a big fee on the payoff, we got a thank you from the borrower. And that's a win-win. That's a win-win. It's also a win for our capital investors. So let's talk about the investor capital real quick related to extensions. So the reason why we made a mistake years ago and defaulted somebody who should not have been defaulted is because we were getting heat from the capital investor. And we wrote a 6-month loan to a good borrower, repeat borrower, many years ago. And he went over the term And we got some heat from the capital investor because we didn't know how to manage these situations. We didn't know how to manage these relationships at the time. I'm sure back then we needed the capital too. So we defaulted a perfectly good borrower who was otherwise performing, except for whenever the maturity date. And he never did a deal with us again. He said he wasn't going to do a deal with us. We defaulted him. And then he did exactly that. He never did a deal with us again. So we learned our lesson and adjusted moving forward to, with our capital investors, we have the understanding that if a borrower is performing, it's somebody good, they're just going over the term a little bit, we're going to extend it because we want to keep as much money outstanding as we can. If we can have as many performing loans outstanding as we can, then we're winning. So we changed that that perception, that expectation with the capital investor. So it turned into, just like the origination fees, HMB keeps the extension fees. And if your loan is outstanding with this borrower and they're still paying every month, everybody wins. And that's the way it's been viewed for many years now, probably a dozen years or more.
Yeah. Okay. So a few other things to add to that. First, Chris mentioned we don't have extension language, but keep in mind, we do have default language. And if they're over the maturity date, they are in default, technically. And if they're in default, we could charge them 24% default interest rate, which is, if we're charging 13%, that's another 9% a month, almost another point or 9% annualized. So that's almost like another point a month. Plus, we also have a 10% late fee on the principal, on the entire principal balance that technically they could be responsible for. So if they really, when you say, well, as you were talking, I could hear people thinking to themselves like, well, if you don't have an extension fee, like, how can you even charge an extension fee? Like, they're just going to fight it. That's not true. We have default language in there. So if they don't, if we want to, we can just default them, charge them a 24% interest rate for going over the maturity date, and also a 10% late fee on the principal balance. So we have that, and we want to make it a negotiation. I'm going to go through our script of how I communicate with folks with related to the extensions, because it's very, very easy to get an extension out of somebody. So again, there's default language, so we could do it that way. So typically what I'll do is if it's somebody that we want to extend, they're in good standing, and I'll see what their situation is. I'll be like, hey, listen, how long of an extension do you need? Be like, yeah, I really only need like 6 more months. I know it took longer, but there's permits. And typically what I'll say is, honestly, like, we don't really like doing extensions. These are set up as short-term loans, 1 year loans. We don't really like going any longer. Let me see what I can do. Typically what we do, though, is we charge another 3 points for another year, just like a refinance, right? It's 3 points. But since you only need it for 6 months, it'll only be a 1.5% extension fee, right? And then we could do it that way. And literally nobody's ever fought that, because they're like, oh, that makes sense. They make their money on the points. They're charging 3 points on the front end. If I need a full year, I can get 3 points. If I need a half a year, I need 1.5 points. Money now is better than money later. So I'll typically be like, hey, that is paid up front. We can ACH it out of your account, the 1.5%. And if they're like, yeah, I'd rather be put on the back end, is there a way to do it that way? Yeah, there is, but it's going to cost a little bit more, like a point more. They're like, okay, let's just do that. That makes sense. Because again, guaranteed money now is better than, even if it's more money later. So that's usually
they all put it on the back, though.
Yeah, they all put it on the back. They all put it on the back. So that's okay.
At a higher fee.
Then you just have, a higher amount, and just like that big payoff we had before. So if you script this the right way, and this is questions a lot of people in the mastermind group have asked, is, I'm not 100% sure how to present this to them. They're a good borrower, and listen, if they need a month and they're a good borrower, just give them an extra month. There's plenty of times that we've done, little extensions here and there. But if it's more than a few months, like, there's no reason not to charge, a small fee. Now, there's been situations in the past where we've charged larger fees, because we can, if that's what works. And sometimes it upsets borrowers on that, and you have to make that decision. Is this a borrower that you want to work with again, or not a borrower that you want to work with again? I remembered there was a borrower that I was trying to do a really big favor on. It was a deal that we got paid off, I think, Chris, in December, where they're like, we never talked about, I didn't realize there was an extension fee, blah, 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 blah. There was one guy that actually did kind of get upset, but it was his partner. It wasn't necessarily the borrower. It was like his partner that was helping him. And I'm like, listen, we could charge 24% default. We could do this. We could do that. Like, honestly, like, I'm doing you a favor. And he was like, you're right. Let's just, that's fine. The extension fee works. One other quick story related to this is we actually do have a deal that has been performing. This has been going on for multiple years. It's a 6-unit property that we have maybe about an hour north of our office. And it's been going on for years. And the guy can't refi. He's trying to refinance. And he's having a hard time with it. And we're kind of like, enough is enough. Like, let's just get paid off. We're at a comfortable spot. He had a big tax bill that he didn't pay, and we got stuck paying it because it went to tax sale. So we had to front money, and technically he's in default if that happens, right? And again, whenever you front money to somebody, you can charge interest on that money as well. So it's rolling and we're getting interest on it. We're charging interest on it. But like, I don't know. It's one of those things that like eventually if a loan's outstanding long enough, sometimes it's just like, hey, I just want to get paid off in this thing and roll my money into a new deal. Because the intention of a hard money loan, especially if you're charging 12, 13, 14, 15, 16%, is not for it to be outstanding for a long period of time. So ideally, you get the money back and you keep it rolling. But again, it's not an awful thing. One other quick tip, and this happens a good bit as well, is we'll agree to do extensions if they do principal pay downs as well, right? Because sometimes you kind of have to engineer an exit or help them engineer it, or at least like motivate them to get out of your loan. So sometimes we'll be like, hey, listen, it's $100,000 note. If you want a year, it's 3 points, but you're also going to have to pay us down by 5% or 10%. And that'll go towards principal pay down. It's not a fee. And then your balance is $90,000. So sometimes we'll try that as well. But again, the purpose of all of this is be creative and make a business decision and, do what's a win-win for both parties. If you want out of the deal because the borrower is a pain in the neck, even if they're making payments, like do it that way. But also, if the borrower is having a hard time getting out of the loan, you got to be careful on that because you might not necessarily want to foreclose on that property, right? Like if you're at a high leverage spot, you might, rather than make monthly payments, right? You might then have to go through the foreclosure process. If it's a lower LTV deal and they're a pain in the neck, yeah, maybe you can force them out, but just be creative on it. There's no right or wrong.
That being said, guys, we are definitely curious to hear how you are handling extensions in terms of fees and legal and negotiations, everything else. Chime in the mastermind group. If you haven't done so already, check out hardmoneymastermind.com. We'll continue this conversation there, and we'll see everyone here again next time on the Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.